For decades, Rob Reiner was seen as one of Hollywood's safest names, a respected director, a devoted husband, a loving father, a man who seemed untouched by scandal. But at 78, Sally Struthers shattered that image with a truth she had carried for years. She didn't speak at a press conference. She didn't release a statement through publicists. She spoke quietly, almost reluctantly, and what she revealed turned a beloved Hollywood story into something far darker. According to Sally, Rob Reiner wasn't living his final years in peace. He was living in fear. Fear inside his own home. Fear of someone the public would never suspect. And fear strong enough to keep him silent, even as the danger grew. What happened to Rob Reiner was not a sudden tragedy. It was a slow, hidden unraveling. And once you hear what Sally Struthers finally admitted, you begin to realize that Hollywood's most heartbreaking secrets are often the ones no one dares to tell. What Sally Struthers revealed didn't come from rumors or headlines. It came from years of watching a man she loved slowly disappear behind a smile that no longer reached his eyes. She first noticed the change during what should have been an ordinary lunch. Rob Reiner arrived late, distracted, and visibly tense. He kept his phone face down on the table, yet flinched every time it buzzed. When Sally joked about him being busier than usual, he forced a laugh, but his hands were shaking. That was the first time she heard him say it. "I love my son," Rob said quietly, "but I don't know how to help him anymore." At the time, Sally assumed this was a familiar Hollywood story, an adult child struggling under the weight of expectations. But Rob's voice carried something deeper than frustration. It carried fear. Over the following months, their conversations grew heavier. Rob no longer spoke freely about his projects. He avoided inviting friends to his home. He stopped hosting dinners. And when Sally asked why, his answers were vague, carefully measured, as if he were choosing every word to avoid triggering something or someone. Behind closed doors, Rob's family life was unraveling. His eldest son, Nick, had been battling addiction for years. Rehab stints came and went. Promises were made and broken. Each relapse chipped away at the household's sense of safety. What began as emotional volatility gradually escalated into something far more dangerous. Sally would later describe the dynamic as walking on glass. Everyone in the house adjusted their behavior around Nick's moods. Conversations were shortened. Disagreements were avoided. Money was quietly transferred. Boundaries dissolved. Rob believed, like many parents do, that unconditional love would eventually bring his son back. He paid debts. He covered mistakes. He shielded Nick from consequences not out of denial, but out of hope. Hope that the next second chance would be the one that worked. But addiction doesn't respond to hope alone. According to Sally, the turning point came when Rob stopped calling his situation stress and started calling it fear. He admitted that arguments at home no longer felt verbal, they felt threatening. Doors were slammed, voices were raised, objects were thrown, and afterward, apologies always followed, tearful, convincing, temporary. What haunted Sally most was how Rob minimized his own pain. "It's not that bad," he told her once, brushing off a visible bruise on his forearm. He laughed it away, changed the subject, asked about her work. But Sally knew better. She had spent decades around actors. She recognized performance when she saw it, and Rob was performing the role of everything is fine, with frightening precision. The truth was, the household had become emotionally hostage to Nick's instability. Rob and his wife lived in constant anticipation of the next explosion. Nights were restless, sleep came in fragments, and silence once comforting became ominous. Friends noticed changes too. One close associate recalled Rob declining a film meeting because he couldn't leave the house that day. Another mentioned that Rob seemed increasingly isolated, cutting off long-standing social connections. It wasn't depression. It was vigilance. He was always waiting for something to happen. One of the most disturbing details Sally shared was Rob's reluctance to involve authorities, no matter how volatile things became. He refused to call the police. He refused to document incidents. His reasoning was simple and devastating. "If I do that, I lose him forever." In Rob's mind, protection and love were inseparable. To expose Nick was to abandon him. And Rob Reiner, a man known for fighting injustice on screen, couldn't bring himself to confront it in his own living room. The situation reached a critical moment when a mutual friend, someone far outside the family, witnessed a heated confrontation. According to Sally, this person later told Rob plainly, "You are not safe in that house." Rob listened, he nodded, and then he did nothing. Not because he didn't believe it, but because he believed that stepping back would destroy what little relationship he had left with his son. Sally described this period as watching a man shrink inside himself. The confidence that once defined Rob's presence faded. His voice softened, his posture changed. He became careful in ways that had nothing to do with age. And yet, publicly, everything looked normal. No police reports, no public scandals, no headlines. Just a celebrated Hollywood figure quietly enduring a nightmare no one was meant to see. The most painful part, Sally admitted, was realizing how easy it is for suffering to hide behind success. Money didn't protect Rob, fame didn't shield him, experience didn't prepare him. He was simply a father, terrified of losing his child even as that fear slowly consumed him. And this was only the beginning, because the warning signs everyone missed would soon escalate into something irreversible, forcing Hollywood to confront a truth far darker than anyone was ready to accept. As the tension inside the Reiner household intensified, the warning signs became impossible to ignore, yet they remained unspoken. Sally revealed that in the months leading up to the tragedy, Rob began avoiding eye contact whenever Nick's name came up. It wasn't shame, it was calculation. Every word felt like it could trigger something unpredictable. Rob was no longer speaking freely in his own life. The final weeks were marked by a series of small, unsettling incidents. A broken lamp, a hole punched into a wall. Neighbors later admitted they had heard raised voices late at night, followed by long stretches of silence that felt heavier than the shouting itself. No one called the police. In a wealthy, quiet neighborhood, discomfort is often mistaken for privacy. One incident, in particular, stayed with Sally. Rob showed up to a scheduled meeting with a visible cut near his temple. When asked what happened, he claimed he slipped on the stairs. The explanation sounded rehearsed. Sally didn't press him. She would later say that this was her greatest regret, not asking the question she already knew the answer to. Because by then, Rob wasn't just protecting his son, he was protecting the illusion that things were still under control. Behind the scenes, friends urged intervention, rehab, distance, legal boundaries. One well-known Hollywood figure, someone Rob trusted deeply, reportedly told him, "Love doesn't mean letting yourself be destroyed." Rob listened, he nodded, and once again, he chose silence. The night everything ended did not begin with chaos. According to later reports, it began with an argument that sounded familiar. Money, accusations, old wounds reopened, the kind of fight that had happened before and always ended with apologies. But this time, something was different. Witnesses later described hearing shouting escalate rapidly. A neighbor recalled a loud crash, followed by screams. By the time authorities arrived, it was too late. What had been hidden for years exploded in a matter of minutes. The details that emerged afterward shocked even seasoned investigators. There were signs of a struggle, defensive wounds, evidence that Rob tried to de-escalate, to calm the situation, to reason with someone who was no longer reachable. In the end, love offered no protection. Hollywood reacted the way it always does, with disbelief. Colleagues described Rob as gentle, thoughtful, non-confrontational. No one could reconcile that image with the violence of his final moments. But Sally wasn't surprised. She was devastated but not shocked. "People think monsters look obvious," she said later. "They don't. Sometimes they look like family." In the days following the tragedy, public statements were carefully worded. Privacy was requested, speculation was discouraged, but behind closed doors, the truth could no longer be contained. Sally made the decision to speak out, not for attention but out of anger. Anger at a system that teaches victims to stay quiet. Anger at a culture that treats family violence as something too uncomfortable to confront. And anger at herself for accepting silence when she should have demanded answers. She described Rob's death as avoidable, but only if someone had been brave enough to break the spell of denial. The most haunting realization came afterward. Rob Reiner, a man who spent his life telling stories about justice, truth, and courage, could not find a way to apply those lessons to his own life. not because he was weak, but because he was human. He believed love could fix what accountability could not, and that belief cost him everything. What remains is not just a tragic ending, but a warning, a reminder that danger does not always arrive suddenly. Sometimes it grows quietly, patiently, behind closed doors until the moment it can no longer be ignored, and by then, it's already too late. In the end, Rob Reiner's story is not just a Hollywood tragedy, it is a human warning. It reminds us that danger does not always arrive as a stranger. Sometimes it grows quietly inside the people we love most. It wears the face of family, hides behind excuses, and survives because no one wants to believe the truth. Rob was not blind, he was not naive. He was a father who believed love could outlast violence, and that belief slowly trapped him in silence. His story forces us to confront an uncomfortable reality. Protecting someone does not always mean saving them, and silence, no matter how loving its intention, can be deadly. Sally Struthers did not speak out to assign blame. She spoke because truth, even when painful, is the only way tragedy gains meaning. Her voice gives Rob what he never allowed himself a chance to be seen as more than a public figure, but as a man who loved too deeply and paid too high a price. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever ignored a warning because it was too hard to face? Share your thoughts in the comments. Like this video if you believe difficult stories deserve to be told, and subscribe for more untold truths from behind Hollywood's brightest lights, because awareness can save lives before it's too late.